So here's the setting for this complaint. And Sarah Elliott, who is the governor's press secretary, communications director, and Ron Zeller, who has the same job in the Department of Agriculture, were asked by a radio station in Lewistown to do an announcement, essentially emphasizing the importance of agriculture in Montana and asking the people of Montana to thank them for their role in our economy. Mr. Zeller, Ms. Elliott, and the governor did a public service announcement, which you have in verbatim in both the sound version of it as well as a transcript of it. All of those things were done, the preparation of the recording, the emailing of that recording back to not only the radio station in Lewistown, but other radio stations in the state, after the governor filed for re-election. There's no dispute about those facts. And while the governor recognizes and acknowledges, as you said in your opening statement, that time, facilities, equipment, and personnel may have been used in the production and distribution of that public service announcement, not one red cent of state monies were paid for that ad. And I think that's the significance of the statutory argument that we make here today. It's our position that while the statute prohibits the use of state money on ads after a public official has filed, it does not prohibit the use of facilities, equipment, supplies, and personnel in doing so. And there's a good reason for that. The governor, this governor particularly, believes that it's important to tout Montana, to tout its agriculture, to promote its industry, to promote tourism. And the way he does that is to communicate, not only with the citizens of Montana, but the citizens of this country. The construction that the Republicans want you to put on this statute would essentially stop him from doing his job after he files for election, for re-election, after any public official files for re-election. Now let me give you a sense about why that would be absurd and contrary to any sound public policy. On a daily basis, Sarah Elliott gets requests from people around the state to have the governor do things to promote whatever it is they're interested in. For example, before the election, the governor was asked to do a little blurb and both in voice as well as in print for the Folk Festival Review. And that festival ran after the election. He did a greeting to troops in Iraq. It was a video greeting. He asked to do all kinds of things on tourism, particularly during the summer months when we have tourists here. Now, since the Republicans have filed this complaint, the governor has decided that until you decide this question, he is simply not going to do those kinds of communications. And to give you some examples, the Surgeon General is coming this month and asked the governor to do a PSA on promoting a call to action to reduce underage drinking. The Surgeon General is still coming, and I assume will promote that idea, but the governor is not going to be involved in that dissemination of communication. Ironically, shortly after this complaint was filed, after this complaint was filed and the publicity attendant to that, the Lewistown radio station again called the governor's office and said, will you do a PSA for us on thanking and congratulating all the grads, high school grads this year, and the importance of education. And again, the governor declined to do that because of the question raised by the Republicans as to the applicability of this provision. Now, these are just sort of examples of the daily kinds of things the governor receives requests for. And he's not the only public official that gets these kinds of requests. For example, and if I may approach, on May 1st, 2008, I'd like to have you take judicial notice of this news story that appeared, I guess it's not a news story, it's a public message that Brad Johnson did that appeared in the Great Falls Tribune. And Brad Johnson, like the governor, is on duty 24 hours. He gets paid for working 24 hours, and I assume that he wrote this, and he didn't. Maybe he had somebody in his office write it. But it has his picture on it, and it goes to a newspaper, and that's what the Republicans are saying is prohibited and unethical under the statute. And this is just an example of the kinds of things that would be essentially stopped if you construe the language of the statute as the Republicans want you to. Now, we think that as a matter of law, this is not a difficult legal issue. I will concede, for the sake of my argument, I have to concede, I think, that there are significant questions regarding the language that's used in the statute that the complaint is based upon. It prohibits the use of state funds for any ad or PSA in the newspaper, radio, or TV. Now, I would bet that I could get media people in this room into a discussion, and they would have differing views as to what an ad is and what a PSA is. Is an ad something that asks the people of Montana to do themselves a favor and register now? Is that an ad? The statute doesn't say what an ad is. And more importantly, we think that the statutory use of the word state funds must be read to exclude the time, facilities, equipment, supplies, and personnel of the state. And it must be read that way as a matter of statutory construction.